how's it going? This is Jeff again. Welcome back to my Cave of Cool Books. And it is Christmas Day here in Osaka. It's kind of a rainy, misty, and not super cold, but kind of drab day. But it's bright and shiny and sunny for me because I'm on holiday. Woo! So I am pretty excited about that. Not only holiday for Christmas, of course, most people get Christmas off, not everyone. Lots of people out there working in stores and shops around the world. Christmas is just another day here in Japan, but this is the official kickoff of my long winter and early spring vacation from my main job, my main teaching job here in Osaka, and I am very happy to be having some more free time to read, to follow YouTube videos, to record more YouTube videos, and to watch movies and hang out with friends and other things like that. Anyway, I thought I would jump on the end of year bandwagon and go through my top 10 reads of 2025. First, I'll talk a little bit about my stats so far. Now, the month is not quite over. December isn't finished yet. We got about one more week, and I may get another couple books read. Right now, as of recording this video, my standings are 65 books that I read this past year, and I also read 30 plus short stories and novelettes, probably more than that. That's all that I have mentioned on the channel that I've covered and reviewed. There's a few others that I haven't, I'm sure that I did earlier in the year before I started my channel. But I'm going to hope to up both of those numbers next year. I'll probably try to aim for 75 books at least. Now, to be fair, a lot of my books, the books that I've read are shorter. They're not super long, anywhere from 130 pages to 250 range or so is the average. I did read a couple of longer books, including my number 10, which I'll get to in a moment. But some other stats, let's see. I read 39 of those 65 books in print form. Here, what I have here in my library. 25 of them were digital or ebooks that I read on my Kindle Paperwhite, which is getting a little old, but still hanging in there. And I listened earlier in the year, back in January of this year, I listened to one of the books, which will be in my top 10. I listened to that on audiobook. I do a lot of walking and on my commute to and from work and riding on trains. I usually use that time mostly to read or to, when I'm walking, listen often to podcasts or BookTube videos or other YouTube videos. I do like audiobooks quite a bit, but I don't get through too many of them in a given year. I'll try to read a few more next year, though. I have some good ones loaded up on my my Audible account, my Audible app. So we'll see how that goes in the new year. A couple other things. Total pages I read, according to the tracker that I use, was 12,546 pages. That's only for the novels and short story collections that I recorded, not the short stories and novelettes. So if you added those together, I'd probably be certainly over the 13,000 mark. Drop in the bucket compared to someone like Steve Donahue or even the average booktuber, but not bad for me. As I mentioned in my last video, my kind of wrap-up video, this year, starting a BookTube channel has really ramped up my reading, more than double from the previous year, and that's a good thing. Just as it breaks down for genre, number one genre for me was, no surprise, mystery fiction. I read 63 of the books were fiction and 2 were nonfiction, 2 were memoir, and that memoir accounts for about 2.8% of the books I read, so not very much. I read one kid's book this year, which was really fun, and I hope to read a few more next year. But following mystery were equally all three tied at 18.1%, were science fiction, fantasy, and adventure fiction. Now, these are my own kind of classifications as I classified these books. 9.7% westerns. You'll see at least one western on my top 10. And let's see, horror was 6.9%. I didn't read a lot of horror, and I don't usually, but I did read some, both for Horror Mayhem last May and also Occult Detective October. Especially around Halloween and the spooky season, I feel more like reading horror. Otherwise, I'm not a massive horror guy, although I did read a horror novel. I did read Totem by David Morrell. I read both versions. I read, because the ebook version I had included his original longer version and then the shorter version that was released, I guess, in the 70s or 80s in paperback novel form. And that was very interesting. I enjoyed that. Without further ado, let's get into the top 10. Now, I will mention a few runners up as we go along, because some of them will be other books by authors that are mentioned in this top 10. But traditionally, as we always do these things, generally we'll start at number 10. And number 10 is kind of a rare, more modern read. There are a few modern or more recent books on this list, the top 10. Those who watch my channel regularly know that I mostly read older vintage kind of genre fiction, but I do occasionally read newer things. And one of the ones I enjoyed, my number 10 book of the year, was Still Life with Crows by Douglas Preston and Lincoln Child. This is the book. This is the fourth book in the Agent Pendergrast series. Agent Pendergrast is this very cool character, kind of a weird, spooky, unusual guy, kind of, I guess you could say it's almost like a Fox Mulder, but in a very different form, very original in his own right, who investigates weird and sometimes monstrous and real-life monsters, like in the book Relic, which is the first book in this series. This is a very fun, fascinating, weird, and bloody, and strange, and pulse-poundingly suspenseful thriller, kind of mystery thriller for sure, as Agent Pendergrast comes to this small Kansas farming community where a bunch of strange, brutal slayings have been happening, where the killer seems to have monstrously slaughtered various people and laid out a kind of tableau of, including the opening one that gives the book its title, where a corpse is surrounded by a bunch of headless, bunch of crow's heads stuck on, corn stalks around it, etc. Very weird, ritualistic sort of killings, and they're all slightly different. And Agent Pendergrast arrives in town, much to the kind of dismay and disenchantment of the local good old boy sheriff, who is painted, to be fair, in a fair light in a lot of cases, as a guy trying his best, but a little out of his depth with this weird, monstrous series of killings. And this is where Pendergrast first befriends this young woman named Corey, who eventually kind of is sponsored by him, goes on to be a kind of an agent in training herself. Anyway, I couldn't put this book down. It was one of those ones where you pick it up and you just can't put it down. And I didn't finish it till like in wee hours of the morning. I just read it straight through, pretty much a whole in a day or so. All 400 plus pages of it. It was lightning fast pace and really gripping and interesting and crazy and ridiculously over the top towards the end, but with the last 60, maybe even 100 pages set in this cave system where the various characters are playing a cat and mouse game with this weird monstrous killer guy. Crazy book, very good, very interesting, and a lot of fun. I read a lot of good books this year, only a couple that I would rank on the bottom. Looking at you, Reassembled Man. Also a book from a very well-known author, Harlan Coben. Didn't really like the book I read of his. Anyway, Still Life with Crows, really fun if you like that kind of souped up, nasty thriller. And Agent Pendergrast is a really cool character. I'm looking forward to returning to further novels with him, maybe one more next year. Not something I'm going to, do a binge on, but a lot of fun. Good, kind of high, top-tier airport read sort of stuff. Now, I read a lot of Louis L'Amour this year, or at least a lot by my previous standards. I read 4 books by Louis L'Amour. I could easily put any of the 4 in this number 9 slot, but I'm going to go with the first one I read this year, which was Heller with a Gun. This one features a kind of acting troupe that has inadvertently signed on with a guide who's planning leading them through a pass in the mountains and is planning to rob them. Really bad guy, and they interact with this typical Lemore type of laconic, very capable loner that takes a liking to a couple of the women and becomes concerned for their safety, and kind of travels along behind them to kind of make sure they don't come to any mischief. And it's just action galore, set in the harsh, snowy wilderness of Wyoming, I believe. That was a really good read. I just finished another one just a couple days ago over on the dry side in one of my eBay lots hauls I got earlier this year. I got several Louis L'Amour Westerns, and I read this one. This one was also excellent, as was The Key Lock Man, and of course the Baudry collection of stories that I also read for June on the Range. So any one of those could fit in here. It's kind of a grab bag slot of Louis L'Amour Westerns. They were all really enjoyable. I know not everyone can get on with L'Amour's kind of straightforward style, but I think he's a very fine storyteller, and I enjoyed all of those books very well, and I plan to read more, not just by him next year, but other authors as well. Okay, number 8 was another, in fact there's a couple more on this list, another more modern, more recent vintage book. This one's a kind of, hard-boiled crime detective thriller. I got a recommendation for this one by watching one of Criminali's videos, and I really enjoyed it. And it's Blood Standard by Laird Barron. This is the first in the Isaiah Coleridge series. There's 3 of them now. I read the second one as well and didn't like it as much. I think Ollie even liked that one more than Blood Standard, but I think the Blood Standard is a more focused book. I did enjoy the second one. I haven't read the third one yet. And Isaiah Coleridge is a former kind of mob enforcer, a big half Maori, tough guy with a heart full of love for animals and the occasional person. Anyway, he gets in a kerfuffle kind of with the mob that he's working for up in Alaska, and he's kind of shunted over through some influence of a mentor of his over to upstate New York, and he kind of ends up setting up a shingle at the end of this first novel as a private detective. And boy, this one's full of kind of gritty action, some really brutal action, where Isaiah Coleridge, who's a big guy and a very capable fighter, dishes out some serious bone-crunching violence on some various miscreants, and he also gets quite a bit of damage, takes quite a bit of damage himself. Very full-blooded, interesting story with a twisty plot with many different branches of the story, and I enjoyed that a lot. Number 7. Now again, this one is something where I could put all 4 of the books I read in this series in this slot pretty much equally, and that's The Sailor on the Seas of Fate by Michael Moorcock. This is the second book in the Elric of Melniboné series. Tim at Secret Fire Books, Chris at Liminal Spaces, and Uncle Jimmy at News from the Gelding have been reading through the Elric saga, and I believe they've finished or will soon be finishing all 6 of the main core novels of that saga. I was keeping pace with them for a while, but I tailed off in the busiest section for me towards the end of the fall here. I have just this month finished the 4th book, The Vanishing Tower. I loved that as well. I could easily put Elric of Melniboné, the first one, or The Weird of the White Wolf, the 3rd one, or the 4th one, The Vanishing Tower, in this slot. They're all pretty much equally fascinating. Elric is a really interesting, brooding, tragic, troubled yet cool main character, and Moorcock's imagination of full of weird creatures and strange magic and alternate worlds and a multiverse of the eternal champion hero thing that he brings in this book, The Sailor on the Seas of Fate, It's just really interesting stuff. I like how they're kind of separated in little novelettes or stories or books. Each one so far has been in 3 books, broken up into 3 books. We're kind of, there's some, continuing threads, of course, and several of these were fix-up novels from original stories. Moorcock does a nice job kind of, getting it all stitched together in a coherent way. And the imagination is off the charts. The prose is very readable and very colorful and beautiful language quite often. Excellent description and plenty of action. The Sailor on the Seas of Fate, I guess, probably just barely pips the others for its kind of really wild titular first story, where Elric is, travels to a strange alternate universe and joins forces with some of Moorcock's other fantasy characters. Prince Coram, there's Dorian Hawkmoon, and there is Ironcastle. I believe these are all other series that Moorcock has written. And they team up, they join together to battle a couple of weird gods that are, or demigods or deities or some weird demonic creatures that are threatening to overpower the whole of the multiverses. And that's a really fascinating story, plus the ones that come later, a little bit more down to earth, but still great adventures. So I'll put this one just slightly above, but it's representing for me basically the 4 books, the first 4 in this Elric saga. Fantastic works of fantasy. Moving on to number 6, good old Edgar Rice Burroughs, one of my all-time favorite writers, made that list. I read another book by him earlier in the year, The Beasts of Tarzan. That was a lot of fun, but the best read was the other book of his I read this year, The Land That Time Forgot. One of the first in the trilogy about Caspak, Caprona, the lost island world that in this one Bowen Tyler ends up in after a good half of the book is spent in straight up kind of World War I thriller. Very fun, very entertaining, and full of, again, wild imagination, monsters, dinosaurs, saber-toothed tigers, cave bears, primitive tribes that are slowly evolving in their weaponry and sophistication of civilization. At the farther north you go on this massive island, surrounded by cliffs and where the low-laying cloud cover keeps it hot, humid, and prehistoric. Very fun book and just a full-throttled adventure, the kind of thing that Edgar Rice Burroughs could do almost like no other. For number 5, we return to a more recent novel. That's Titanium Noir by Nick Harkaway. Nick Harkaway is the son of John le Carré, who is just, the king of espionage and Cold War spy novels. And it turns out his son also has a gift for the prose. This was a really terrific and original feeling book. It may be something that might have seen the light of day as the kind of storytelling in the comic form, but in a prose form, in the style of a kind of noirish or neo-noir, futuristic noir, this was really a fantastic read. Now, Titanium Noir, the whole concept is that there's this city. It's got its own name. I forgot the name of it right now, but it's populated by normal people, a lot of criminal elements, but the elites of society have the money to pay for this kind of drug and painful. They take it in several very painful doses, but it changes them into supermen, basically. I mean, they're literally double the size, or sometimes triple or quadruple the size in some cases in one case anyway, in the leader's case, of a regular human, and they kind of live as almost deities in these cities where they can just live and do as they please. And our hero is an investigator he doesn't work for the police exactly, he kind of works for this group of people. He's a regular human. His former girlfriend and lover is the daughter of the kind of, head of these superhero people. Superhero is the wrong word. because they're not heroic in most cases at all, but they have, amazing strength and resilience, and even, their loud voice can sometimes break the eardrums and break ribs if they roar at someone. That happens to our hero at one stage. And anyway, he is tolerated by the police. He's kind of a man in both worlds, and he could have joined these people to become one himself, and continue his relationship with his former girlfriend, the daughter of this powerful figure who was got in an accident, I believe, and because of being saved by the hero of this book, I wish I could remember his name. I can't at the moment. Anyway, his actions led to her becoming one of these superhuman people, and now she's bigger than he is, stronger than he is, and that's caused some rift in their relationship. He gets involved in a murder of a newly minted one of these super beings, and he starts looking into this weird conspiracy, and there's all sorts of cool, strange underworld characters. There's a couple of just fantastic fights in this book that are so well described and so original. And our hero fights dirty when he has to, because he often is in the final one, he's going up against another super being, and it is a knockdown, drag out. It's pretty impressive, and the story is twisty and interesting. The world he creates is very, cool mix of noir and classic hard-boiled detective tropes, along with this kind of science fictional, fantastical element of these superhumans, and the backstory there, and the mythology and lore pretty much of this city, and all of this world building and all that is just really well done. I highly recommend this book. There has been a sequel. I believe it's called Sleepaway Beach. I have that one on my Kindle. This was also an ebook read, but I have not read the sequel yet. I'm still letting that first one kind of, I like to savor the thought of it. It was really a cool read, and that's why it's as high as it is on my list. Okay, number 4 is The Drunken Forest by Gerald Durrell. Now, this is the one nonfiction or memoir, I guess, on my list. The other memoir I read, The Flight of the Firecrest, which was, about a sea crossing in a small sailboat. That was also great. This one gets the edge just because Gerald Durrell is such an amazing writer. He paints vivid, colorful pictures of his time with his young wife down in Peru. Anyway, he was a collector of animals for zoos. He even started his own zoo. Durrell's a really fascinating figure, fantastic writer. And, he talks about this drunken forest that he visits, and all the animals he finds, the characters that they display, and, of course, all the people that he meets in just a wonderful way. Witty, colorful, evocative prose, and just a joy to read. And I plan to read some more Durrell next year as well. Number 3 was City by Clifford D. Simic. This is my first read of this, and I've been wanting to get to this for a while. Simic, I had previously only read a few of his fantasy works, and they were fine. They were pretty good, especially Where Evil Dwells, but they were written later in his career, and perhaps with less care than this earlier book. Now, this is a fix-up novel. I believe 8 stories stitched together. With the power of this book and the imagination on display, and the humanity and humane feeling that comes through is just wonderful. Yeah, the book does start off a little slow. The first story drags a little bit. It's fine. The stories get better and better as they go on. From story 3 on, just fabulous. Story 2 is good too, interesting. But it's really from story 3 where the book just really takes off. And this basically is chronicling how humanity not only has abandoned cities on the earth, but most of them eventually abandon the earth. And the earth is inherited by kind of genetically altered intelligent dogs and robots. And there's other animals wandering around out there. And a few humans left behind, and it kind of follows some various members of the Webster family who one of the Websters was the first person to kind of operated on some dogs to make them have the ability of speech and higher thought, and just the way Simek captures, the remnants of humanity, the kind of the bleak, sad, boring existence of the last few who remain on the earth, the humans that have mutated into something far different from the regular humans, the dogs, and of course the main robot, Jenkins, who was a servant of the Webster family but becomes a key mentor figure for the remaining animals and people that stay behind. It's all just wonderful stuff. It's really hard to describe the pastoral, kind of bittersweet and vivid storytelling that goes on here. And the stories all hang together they're all kind of interesting in their own way, and they, as taken as a whole, kind of leave the reader at the end with a very satisfied feeling of a really epic scope tale. So really recommend that. Fantastic book. I'm planning to read more Simek in the coming year, especially once I get back to the States and hit the bookstores and try to find some of his other work. I do have Way Station on my Kindle. I know that one's a well-regarded work of his as well. I'll probably start with that one before I get some other books in physical form of his in the new year. That brings us to number 2. Thanks for bearing with me, guys. It's a little long, I know. Number 2 is my one audiobook read of the year, and that is Andy Weir's Project Hail Mary. Now, I like The Martian. I haven't read Artemis, his second book, but The Martian was quite good, and of course so was the movie. But this book was just amazing. Helped along, I'm sure, by a very talented reader of the audiobook. I read this back in January of last year, so I didn't talk about it on my channel, but I forgot the name of the narrator. Was it Ray Porter? I'll put his name up here on the screen. Anyway, he does a fabulous job capturing not only our main character, but also the alien he encounters that is nicknamed Rocky. Such a wonderful character, probably the best side character or supporting character, I guess you could say, of anything I read this year. Really, ultimately a very moving book. It starts as kind of almost a mystery. It's an amazing start. I was intrigued when I picked up this book in the bookstore in physical form. Earlier, I haven't purchased one yet. I will at some stage, but I read the opening chapter, which is where you're just, it's very funny and also full of mystery of how did this guy get to this spaceship. He's waking up from deep cryo sleep, and he's trying to figure out what the hell's going on, who he is, what's he supposed to be doing there, and it goes from there. Now, there's a lot of science, real science. Weir packs a lot of science into this book, which could be boring for a lot of people, but I think you can just let it wash over you, as I did upon occasion. Most of it's pretty fascinating, and the narration of this book really sells it and makes it fascinating. And ultimately, a very moving experience. I really enjoyed this book a lot, and I highly recommend it. Now, I know not everyone, it's a very popular book. It was probably the most, of all the books that were on my Goodreads completed list this year, this one has the most reviews, and it's probably the most well-known. And of course, a movie starring Ryan Gosling as the lead character is coming out soon, and probably going to be pretty fun, but it'll be hard-pressed to match up to the experience of reading this book, or listening in my case. Highly, highly recommended, even though I know not everyone loved this book. If you like science fiction with a sense of humor and you like The Martian, you'll probably like this one. Anyway, that one gets my highest recommendation, as does my number 1. Just barely pipping it to the post is The Three-Bladed Doom by Robert E. Howard. Now, this is an L. Borak novel, one of the few novels that Robert E. Howard ever wrote. He's much more He was much more prolific, of course, in the short story form. Robert E. Howard got a lot of love this year. I know Michael K. Vaughan's Sumerian September event is, focused on Howard's work, and Michael has done a lot to champion Robert E. Howard's writing over the years that he's had his channel going. But this year really saw a lot of focus, especially in the latter half, thanks to the more ubiquitous presence of the Robert E. Howard Foundation on YouTube. They have a wonderful YouTube channel themselves with lots of scholars coming on to talk about various aspects of Robert E. Howard's writing and career. And of course, a lot of my BookTube friends have been, experiencing, and for the first time in some cases, Robert E. Howard's work. And, I read a lot of cool Howard stuff this year. A good runner-up, one of my other runner-up books would certainly be The Lost Valley of Iskander, which I read and reviewed also on this channel. That was a fantastic collection of 3 novelettes starring the same character, Francis Xavier Gordon, El Borak. Just one of the coolest characters you're going to read in an adventure story. He is so determined, resourceful, and capable. And, he's a former Texas gunslinger who ends up in the early teens or early 20s anyway in Afghanistan. He also heads into other neighboring Middle Eastern countries. It's hinted at he's had adventures in India and other places. He speaks, like a native. He loves the harsh desert environment. And this one, just an unbelievably fun read. Gordon ends up infiltrating this mountain fortress peopled with assassins, and him and a couple of good buddies do that, and just unbelievable amounts of action, daring do, skullduggery, encounters with a strange, possibly cryptozoological beastie at one stage. Just the writing, Howard's writing is just so gripping, grab you by the throat, vivid details of action and descriptive powers. Just unbelievably good read. I enjoyed this one so much, and I believe some other people read this one. I know Tim at Secret Fire Books again thought very highly of this one as well. It might end up on in his top 10 somewhere, I hope. Anyway, I think this is just a kick-ass book, and I love Conan, I love Solomon Kane, I love a lot of, I love the Sailor Steve Costigan boxing stories. Howard just has so many genres and so many good stories that he wrote over his career, but you're going to be hard-pressed to find a better adventure story, I think, by him than this one. That's The Three-Bladed Doom by Robert E. Howard. That's my #1 book of the year. Now, I read plenty of other fun books. A lot of them will be in the, I can't conceive of doing a whole 65 book list in order from worst read to best. I'm not able to do that kind of thing. I don't think it's, I just can't even imagine the skull-crushing, frustration and consternation to try to rank all of those in order. It's pretty impossible to do. It was hard enough to choose this top 10. I tip my hat to you gentlemen and ladies who can do that sort of thing. I think I'll just settle for a top 10 list. I may get a couple more books read by the end of this year. I hope so, which would change my stats a little bit. But so far, I'm very pleased with how many I read. Again, it's a small number by a lot of people's standards, but by my own personal standards, it's a good slate, and I was pretty happy with what I read. Overall, I enjoyed almost everything. At least 63 of those books I enjoyed to one degree or another, and a lot of the stories I read. So, without further ado, that will sum up this long best of list. Thanks for watching, as always. I may have one more video in the remaining week. I can't say for sure. I'm heading off to stay for a week in the countryside of Shikoku with my wife's family, and maybe we'll record something down there, perhaps a what I read in December video. But in the meantime, let's call this 2025. It was a good year for me as a reader, maybe not so good for a lot of people or for the world overall, but staying positive for the moment. I had a good reading year in 2025, and also this was the year I started this channel, and I've had a lot of fun here on BookTube. So thanks again for everybody who watched and who found some value in this content, and I hope to see you again real soon in a future video. Take care and Happy New Year!